Welcome to our next session of Coffee with the Candidates. Today we have Curt with us, who is running for the Yankton City Commission. I just want to remind everyone, voting is on April 12th at City Hall or Fire Station number 2, or if you decide to vote in advance, absentee, you can do that starting March 28th. Curt, welcome.
Hello, Nancy. Thank you for the invite, and thanks for putting this on, and it's a good way to discuss things and get the word out. We have 3 open seats and 6 candidates, so hopefully people have plenty of variety to think about.
Well, that's absolutely true. It's nice to have an election where people have some variety of options, and that's one of the reasons we do these interviews. So Curt, will you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Curt. You probably best know me as the owner and manager of the Riverfront Event Center, and a few years back we added the Brewery Event Center, and we also built some hotel in several buildings downtown. So for the last 25 years or so, we've been building and doing things and operating things in the downtown, and we try to rent to businesses, and we have some businesses. But the event centers and the hotels are our businesses, and the rest of them we usually rent to. We're pretty good with buildings. We can repair a lot of stuff. We haven't found an old building we didn't fall in love with. That's just kind of how we are. But in any case, I grew up in Sioux City, Iowa. I went to college around here, went to USD, worked at Citibank in Sioux Falls for 20 years, and started 25 years ago or so to work with Yankton, and I love Yankton and what we do here, and it's a great place in America.
So can you share why you're running for the Yankton City Commission?
Well, at this point in my life, I'm a pretty experienced business person. I hope that I have empathy and understanding of people's life in a lot of different experiences I've had in life, and I'd like to bring that to the commission. I think that having a variety of people on the commission helps make a stronger set of decisions, and I'd like to bring some of the talents that hopefully I have to bear, asking the right questions, having the right discussions, hopefully making better decisions.
So as an elected official, it is hard to put aside your personal beliefs and represent the majority of the constituents that you represent. Can you give me an example of how you will do that as a city commissioner?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. In America, we use a representative form of government. Essentially, voters hire people when they vote for them, and they expect that person to do research and study and think hard and have discussions and listen to their voter base about what particular subjects are important and which way you should go on certain subjects. But they do expect people to be thinking and working hard to figure this stuff out and do the best they can for them. So as you've seen over the last dozen years, sometimes things are this way and sometimes things are that way, but you've got to have good experienced people that'll think things through and spend a lot more time than the average voter does digging into it to figure out what the right thing to do is. Hopefully we're making better decisions that way.
So having served on the commission previously, you understand that sometimes the loudest voice does not necessarily represent the majority. How do you perceive that you'll receive input from the community to kind of know how the majority is feeling about a subject?
Well, if you look at the national scene, of course we have national polls, and that gives you a lot of ideas as to what the majority of people are thinking. But even on the national scene, the majority isn't the majority. It's this segment and that segment, and oh gee, this poll says this and this other poll says that. And the darn stuff will move from day to day or week to week or year to year. And that's certainly been clear this last 2 rather tumultuous years with the COVID, and now, of course, with the war going on. So you have to get out there and talk to people that you run into in your life, bring your experiences in the past to bear. And it's exactly that the news media will grab a subject and talk that subject, and it can be incredibly loud and perhaps biased one direction or another. And you've got to have the patience to kind of wade through that and say, wait a minute, we've been through stuff like this before, give it a minute. Let's make sure the whole story is understood. Let's make sure all parts of the world are getting a chance for their voice to get surfaced. But you're exactly right that sometimes we live in a world where loud loud makes right, and what you find is time helps to buffer that, and a little wisdom in terms of thinking through all the aspects of the problem, listening to all the different people helps a lot.
So can you tell me what your priority projects are for the community of Yankton?
You know, the process that the city uses for capital budgeting is a one-year process as well as a multi-year process. So of course all of the things that I guess you'd think of as basics of a city, your streets, your sewer, your water, all those infrastructure kinds of things are high priority, and they are listed in the financials in these capital expenditure proposals. And the commission, the new commission, as it gets seated, will go back through that again and make adjustments, but you're making adjustments rather than just stopping everything and starting over again. They may decide to do more with this particular street or road or project or bridge or whatever it is, or one of the current debates, of course, it'll come up in another question, is with respect to water and wastewater. And of course, you're not going to stop that, but you may twink that and move left or right a little bit in terms of how that gets done and what priority that is in things. All that stuff is critical to having a good quality city, but that's kind of your infrastructure base. Then you add on top of that the things that are nice to haves or want to haves. And then of course you have this other thing called, did you notice the price of gas just doubled over the last year? Did you notice that the price of wheat is up about 80%? Just in this last week? There's a lot of inflationary pressure, so we're going to have some tightening of the belts, some gee, don't raise taxes, don't raise fees kind of pressure. What could we do to help the community get by this moment that we hope is short-lived, but you don't dare say it's going to be short-lived. You better make sure you are careful with how you do your spending.
So do you have any examples that come to mind when you think about how we can do that as a city?
Well, we're gonna wander into wastewater treatment maybe in the next question, but that's a good example of, it's fortunate that it's a matching kind of a thing. You have to have a good quality water and wastewater treatment system. We have a good water plant now. Hopefully that'll last us for several decades. The wastewater is older. It's not old, but it's older. But fortunately with the federal government, you do have some matching funds that are available, so we can get those to keep our costs down. But the issue is not the loan or even necessarily how quickly we do or do not spend the capital. The issue is we already have some of the highest water and sewer rates in the state. Every city is dealing with the same issue. At the same time that people are struggling with how to drive their car, that we can't have their water and sewer rates continue to go up and up and up. So we're going to have to pressurize to keep the costs down and keep the fee increases minimal in those base services that your family has to have. But at the same time, you got to make sure you keep upgrading your plant. Mm-hmm. So it's a real balancing act.
Yeah, absolutely. How about partnerships and collaborations? We all know that that's really important, whether it's partnerships and collaborations within the city, the state, nationally. All of those are really important to us. Can you tell us what you would do to help strengthen those existing partnerships or maybe grow some new ones?
Well, fortunately, there's a lot of different partnerships in this city. A lot of different groups have cross membership. A lot of people participate in them, and we all tend to kind of get along. Now, we may not all agree on every subject. We'll have good debates left, right, and sideways on a lot of different subjects, but we have the debates, and we don't tend to draw giant red lines in the sand saying, you know, I will go no farther than this. We tend to continue the discussion. So I think what we've got are pretty good partnerships that happen today. We've got to encourage those, and we've got to encourage open conversation and participation, and not go down the road that you see sometimes nationally where you get into the name calling and the more negative side of things, because that deteriorates your partnerships. If you can continue the normal American way of having strong debates, it seems like that's a way to keep your partnerships strong.
So can you name one project that you are proud that the city has accomplished recently, and one that maybe you think could have gone better?
You know, if you look at the last 2 years of the COVID problems that the world's had, just keeping the basic services up and running without a flaw, not listening to the megaphone, huge deafening crisis that was going on, balancing out support for the hospital and the medical and everybody that was worried, and getting through this last 2 years is probably the biggest win you can think of. And it goes across to a lot of things, much wider than just the city itself. But the key is not to overreact and not to listen to the loudest, but to try to do the smart things along the way. And that's another example of, what was obviously the case 2 years ago is not, in retrospect, necessarily the right or wrong thing to do, but some of that's been sorted out in the last 2 years. They've done a good job of not overreacting and do the smart things, and we hopefully will continue to be able to do that.
So I know we've touched on the wastewater treatment facility a little bit. Do you have any other comments you'd like to share on the location or any other aspects of that project?
There has been debate in years past about moving the location downstream a ways, and that becomes a cost-benefit thing. It would be nice to have it moved and have it further away from the city, as well as using the current location for other things. But that's a pretty expensive decision. We'll have to really think about that one pretty hard. I'm more hypersensitive to saying, we had pretty high water sewer rates to start with. Let's try to make sure we don't cause a huge increase in those rates on top of all the other inflationary pressures that are going on, with the cost of food moving up so badly and natural gas, which is going to drive your heating and electricity costs up. Hopefully all that's a short-term bump, but the way it looks right now, it doesn't look like a short-term bump.
So in closing, is there something that you would like to mention today that was not a part of the previously asked questions that will help the voters decide if you have earned their vote?
I guess the last 2 years of the COVID and the mask and the vaccines and all the debates and all that's happened nationally and worldwide, I think we did a good job of staying balanced and staying as wise as we could through that whole thing. Now it's moved off of center stage. Hopefully it'll stay off of center stage. But now with the war going on in Ukraine and the huge inflationary things that are going on, I think locally that's going to translate into a lot of pressure on us as a community to control costs and to not increase fees or taxes to increase the burden on our families. Yes, there will be increased wage rates that will help a little bit, but when if you have to commute very far, the price of gas is almost doubled. That makes a lot of things go up in price that have nothing to do with your particular family car, but has to do with whatever you get delivered and the food that you buy or whatever products you buy. So I think that we're going to have to be financially smart about needs versus wants versus really what's important, and try to keep a lid on the costs more so than we have had to in the last decade or so.
Well, Curt, thank you very much for coming in today. And once again, to the viewing audience, Election Day is April 12th. Thank you very much.
Well, a big thank you to all of you who have helped with this, and hopefully you'll run over and throw a vote for me.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank you.